Welcome and thank you for joining LPG Talks Live. My name is Bridget Perino and I'm your host today. I'm with Innova, the remote tank monitoring provider and the digital partner and an industry council member of the World LPG Association. It is an absolute pleasure to host this edition of LPG Talks Live, LPG's role in the energy transition. It's been exciting to see over 200 registrations stream in the past 10 days for this event. Since we opened up the registration. Clearly, with more than 70 countries having set net zero targets and thousands of communities and businesses independently pledging action to reduce carbon emissions, the role of LPG in this energy transition is a topic of great interest in today's session and in general. So thank you all for tuning in. I am so glad that each of you managed to get a seat in today's session. So before we kick off, let me just remind you that this webinar is being recorded and the recording link will be sent to anyone who registered. So if people who couldn't make it today, they will also receive that recording. And for questions, please do look at your webinar controls at the bottom of the screen. There's a Q&A button. If it doesn't pop up, you may find it under the more 3 dots. We'd love for you to ask questions. We have a Q&A session at the end. And we'll be taking questions from the Q&A facility button at the bottom, not from the chat. Also, I must say this is a World LPG Association meeting and is therefore governed by the World LPG Association statutes, specifically the association's antitrust guidelines that prohibits the discussion of commercially sensitive information, such as pricing, volumes, market share, etc. Now, I am delighted to be joined today by the Chief Advocacy Officer of the World LPG Association, Michael Kelly. Thank you, Michael, for welcoming our audience today and for setting the stage on this important topic.
Welcome, everyone, wherever you are in the world joining us to the latest installment of the LPG Talk Live series. And today, as you heard, we're looking at the role of LPG in the energy transition, which is a subject which impacts us no matter what markets we're in, whether they're in developing markets or we're in developed markets. Let me thank Innova and Bridget Pirano for their support in organizing this series, not just this event, but this series. Without Innova's support, we would have trouble doing this. Today, we're going to hear from a number of experts that'll give you their opinion on the role of LPG in the energy transition. We'll first hear from Rob Honeyman from GemServe, who's going to give us an overview of a new study which is available on our website that looks at this very issue. GemServe is a UK-based consultancy that has done a lot of work for the World LPG Association over the years. And we think that this will give you a nice framing of the issue that we're going to discuss. We also have a very stimulating panel that'll feature experts from various different segments of our industry, giving their thoughts, and that includes the Clean Cooking Alliance, which is an important stakeholder of the World LPG Association, Futuria, a new company that started to help with renewable liquid gases and develop them, a representative from the International Finance Corporation, who's been working with the International Finance Corporation, and finally, Westport Fuels, a long-term member of the WLPGA. All of them will give their perspective on a particular segment of this transition. Now, one thing I wanted to highlight, which ties into today's discussion, is the move that WLPGA is making towards using the term renewable liquid gas as opposed to renewable LPG. Renewable liquid gas is an umbrella term that we will use for all sorts of renewable and recycled molecules that are currently being developed by the industry. Will all come under this umbrella of renewable liquid gas. This also ties into a transition we're making at the WLPGA to change the name of the association. This will happen towards the end of the year. So keep an eye out for this term and watch how this space evolves. Finally, I'd like to also remind you that in November of this year, we'll be holding LPG Week in Rome, along with our colleagues from Liquid Gas Europe. It looks like it's going to be one of the biggest global events ever held. So I encourage you to try and attend if you can, the week of the 13th to the 17th in the Eternal City of Rome. And as part of LPG Week, we'll be holding the first ever Global Science Conference, which is a newly developed global forum dedicated solely to the discussion of science and developments related to renewable fuels in our industry, in the LPG industry. You have until Friday, the 28th of July, to submit an abstract if you're interested in participating in that. And if you have any further questions about that, Rebecca Haroon from Futuria is the person to ask. So with that, I will turn back over to Bridget, and I'll wish all our panelists and all of you participating a wonderful discussion. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate that. All right, well, the first thing we'd like to do today is kick off with a quick poll. You can use your webinar controls to respond. Let's bring up the first poll, which is, where are you calling in from today? Let's take a look at where our audience is located and who's dialing in. So I can see that people are off to a quick start here. Use your webinar controls and just let us know where you're calling in from, and we'll share these results in a minute. We've got about 66% of you so far. We can get it up to 80%. Give us a good indicator of where everyone is calling in from. I see some folks are getting out of bed early in North America for this today and staying up late in other parts of the world. Thank you so much. Let's share those results now. We've got about 76% of the vote in, and here we go. It's an interesting panel. We've got a lot coming in from North America and Europe, but quite a large contingent today from Africa. So Simba, you've got some folks on the same continent as you, as well as Tamsin. So anyway, that's interesting. Thanks very much, folks. We'll continue on now. We appreciate your participation in our polls. We have one more for you coming up in a short little bit here. But our next speaker is the head of analysis at GemServe. Rob Honeyman leads the economics team at GemServe and is responsible for ensuring very high quality analysis is provided to their clients. He's got an in-depth understanding of the way in which economics interacts with policymaking. He works across the sectors that are engaged with the net zero transition, including heat, energy efficiency, biofuels, hydrogen, and transport. He has significant expertise in domestic heat economics and finance, having developed a comprehensive economic tool that evaluates the performance and economics of heat pumps across various buildings, topologies, and climates. He's also worked with heat pump manufacturers to assess the viability of different business models such as RHI, third-party finance, and facilitate their discussions with financiers. Recently, Rob has led teams that estimated the number of jobs that would be supported by the net zero transition, modeled in detail policy options to encourage domestic energy efficiency in a local authority area, and assessed heat decarbonisation options for rural homes. So quite apropos, Rob, for you to be on the call with us today. He's going to set the scene for us. Thank you very much, Rob Honeyman.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bridget. And it's fantastic to be speaking to you all today. So yeah, my name's Rob Honeyman, and I had the pleasure of contributing to new research, which is included in WLPGA's recently released report, LPG's role in the energy transition. Can you move to the next slide, please? Great. So whilst that next slide comes up, I'll just sort of rattle through a bit of an intro. So it's a real pleasure to be speaking to you today and introducing today's session. I'll speak for about 4 minutes before passing over to a great panel of speakers later on in the event. As a bit of background, I work at GemServe. We're a management consultancy based in the UK with offices in Ireland as well. And we're part of the Talent Group, which has offices in France and also worldwide as well. At GemServe, we work with our clients on energy markets, low carbon policy developments, and digital transformation. And I personally lead a team of economists and analysts, and we really enjoyed working on this research. So big shout out to Michael King and Lena Fowler, who are on the screen in my team for their research on this project. A lot of the good work was theirs, really. I get to take all the glory. And also to Michael Kelly and Tamsin from WLPGA for their support and input over the past couple of months. So I'll be introducing you to a 54-page report. Don't worry, I'm not going to be going through it in lots of detail over the next 4 minutes, but it's available on the website, and I really encourage you to read it in detail. So our starting point for this research was to take stock of the various stages of the energy transition globally. As Michael commented earlier, it impacts us all, the energy transition, but it looks very different in different countries globally. So we wanted to pull out some sort of really impressive use cases for LPG globally. And we wanted to map some of these use cases to UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Energy Trilemma, some frameworks that really govern how the energy transition is progressing in different countries across the world. And just on the left-hand side of the screen there, you can see some of the chapters and some of the use cases that we looked at in detail. So transitioning from biomass to LPG for cooking, transitioning from higher carbon fuels to LPG, across road transport, power generation, industry and agricultural sector, and maritime, transitioning from monofuel applications to hybrid LPG systems. And also we had a sort of a looking ahead chapter thinking about renewable liquid gases and the transition away from conventional LPG as well. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Great. So I just wanted to give you kind of a flavor for how each of the chapters are constructed. So I'm just going to give you one example, which is biomass to LPG cooking. And the context here that I'm sure is familiar to many of you, but perhaps not all, is that a third of the world's population lack access to clean cooking methods and instead rely on polluting cooking fuels such as kerosene, coal, and biomass, including firewood and charcoal. And the combustion of these fuels has really led to very damaging levels of household air pollution. And it's estimated to cause 3.8 million premature deaths per year globally. So it's a really significant problem. And has been a significant problem in countries like India in the past and also across the continent of Africa. And LPG's role is as a clean burning alternative that could save labor time associated with gathering fuel. So there's absolutely a fantastic environmental and health use case here, but there's also potentially development benefits from saving labor time associated with gathering fuel. And in the bottom left of this screen, we've actually included some analysis based on an Indian case study where we've looked at the time saved from collecting and gathering fuel and how that could be better used in the labour market and create really quite a substantive case for LPG as a sort of a cost-effective alternative to firewood and charcoal cooking. On the right-hand side, we've done this for each of the chapters. We've kind of mapped the particular use case to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and you can see gender equality, you can see climate action, you can see health and well-being. There's lots of detail underneath each of those Sustainable Development Goals, which I won't go into detail. Great, next slide, please. Great, and then the remaining chapters that we have in the reports, we've looked at some applications where there could be great benefit from switching from higher carbon fuels, so oil and coal, to LPG, so power generation, vehicles, the maritime sector, the agricultural sector. For example, in 2020, 56% of the total energy demand of the agricultural sector in the EU was met by oil and other petroleum-based fuels. There could be a really interesting case for switching over quite rapidly to LPG, which has lower sort of air pollution impacts and is well placed to offer a sort of an off-grid solution, particularly for hard to decarbonize sectors. Again, we've mapped to Sustainable Development Goals, as you can see on the screen. And just at the bottom, I've kind of highlighted a few challenges which aren't included in the report, but I think would be interesting to consider in future research. The third chapter is looking at hybrid applications, which again are quite interesting in transport, power and heating. So we see things like technologies like hybrid heat pumps really coming to the market increasingly. Some consumers valuing the resilience and consistency of a LPG boiler alongside potentially electric heat pump or heating system. And I think there's a really interesting story there in terms of the flexibility benefits that LPG could offer as a very transportable and storable fuel, and a good complement to increasingly variable electrical systems, energy systems in the future. And our final chapter was a bit of a look ahead, and looking ahead to conventional to renewable liquid gas energy transition. And again, LPG and the LPG sector has a really important role to play in bringing some of these renewable liquid gases to markets that can deliver deep decarbonisation in some of the markets that are really pushing ahead with decarbonisation globally. Great, just conscious of time, I'll leave it there, but yeah, really look forward to the rest of the discussion and any questions. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Rob. Thank you so much. Some great information in there. And Rob is with GemServe if you're interested in learning more. But Rob, I do have a question for you. If you sit back and think about, what if you replicated this study, say 10 years from now? How might the use of LPG in the energy transition have actually changed?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. One of the chapters that we were particularly interested in developing and would like to kind of develop a little bit more in the future is thinking about security of supply issues and the positive role that LPG can play in providing flexibility to the energy system. I think something that we see increasingly in Europe and North America is a need for flexible energy sources that can provide storage at times when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. So I think there's a really interesting use case there that I think would become more prominent over time, over the coming years.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your presentation and for your insights this afternoon, evening, and wherever people are in the world today. It's most appreciated. Okay,
Thanks.
so we're very welcome. Thank you. We're going to move on now with another audience poll. What area of the LPG energy transition impacts you the most? Domestic use, transport, power gen, hybrid renewable LPG systems, or renewable liquid gas? So if you could take a moment to respond to this, and I see again, we're off to a quick start. 25% of the team has responded. So interesting. There's a little bit of a dueling battle going on with the results that we can see on our side at the moment. We're at 53%. Come on, folks, let's see if we can get it up to 80 and share these exciting results with everybody. It's quite fascinating, actually. Okay, we're at 65. We'll just give it another quick minute. See where we get to a conclusive winner here. Okay, we've got 70%, and let's we've got a clear winner coming forth. Let's share those results with everybody. Domestic use is just peaked over 51% of the vote today, so not unexpected, but renewable liquid gas was giving it a run for its money there for a while, 31%. So a number of folks on our expert panel will probably have something to say about that as well as we go forward. Transport, power gen, and hybrid systems tailing a little bit, at least at this point, but we'll see what happens with some of those in the future as well. So thank you everyone for taking part in that particular poll. We'll stop sharing that now. Okay, what I'd like to do now is introduce our panel moderator today, Tamsin Rankin from World LPG Association. She is our expert moderator today. She's been very involved with a number of these Talks Live sessions in the past, and it's great to have her moderating our panel of experts today. So I'm going to hand over to you, Tamsin, to introduce the panel. We can show the panelists again and enjoy this discussion. It promises to be very interesting. Thanks, Tamsin.
Excellent. Thank you, Bridget. And it's been really interesting. And thank you, Rob, for that beautiful framing of the study that we've worked on. You've really put it into place for us. So thank you for that. So basically, to succinctly pull it all together again, wherever you are in the world, whatever stage of development your market's in, LPG can help you reach your decarbonization targets. So it's, as Rob was saying, if you're transitioning from biomass to LPG for cooking, you're decarbonizing. If you're replacing higher carbon fuels with LPG for various applications, you're decarbonizing. If you're combining the LPG with renewables and hybrid systems, you're decarbonizing. And if you're moving from conventional LPG to renewable liquid gas, you're decarbonizing. And I have a panel of experts today. I'm so looking forward to this discussion as we start to delve a bit further into these various applications of LPG. And we're going to be looking at the different roles that they play within the energy transition. So let's kick it off. So as we saw earlier today on panel question number 1, 18% of us are from Africa. So I'm going to start with my fellow African or Southern African panel member here, Simba Madumba from the Clean Cooking Alliance. So Simba is the Senior Portfolio Manager in the Clean Cooking Alliance's Marketing Strengthening team, where he works across various enterprise and private sector facing initiatives. Welcome, Simba.
Thank you.
Simba, if we can make, great, thanks for joining us. What is the Clean Cooking Alliance's position on the role of LPG in the clean cooking and energy transition?
Great, thanks very much, Tamsin. And I'm really lucky to go after Rob, who's done a good job of framing the clean cooking issue in the context of LPG. So I'm not going to spend a lot more time elaborating on that because I think he's done a really great job. I'll just mention that the latest SDG 7 report that's just been published earlier this month actually shows us that we're still at about 2.3 billion people worldwide that use dirty or polluting fuels and technologies for their daily cooking needs. The problem is, as we move towards 2030, which was kind of the line in the sand, we're not going to, at the current trajectory, we're not going to be much better. In fact, I think the report is saying that we'll still be at about 1.9 billion people, and a large number of that will be in sub-Saharan Africa, which is where I live. And I spend a lot of time in the countryside, and I see the impact of wood harvesting, forest degradation because of cooking. It's a really big problem. And whenever we at the Clean Cooking Alliance get invited by friends and colleagues to speak about this, we always try to emphasize the scale of the problem. Clean cooking is from our perspective, one of the most underappreciated and underinvested global development issues there is. And we're always looking for platforms, and I thank you very much for the invitation today to kind of highlight the issues around that. So in terms of just one additional point to what Rob said, in terms of a just energy transition, you can't really talk about a just energy transition without talking about clean cooking. And in terms of, for some statistics, right? So in sub-Saharan Africa, where I spend most of my time and do most of my work, household energy accounts for, clean cooking accounts for 90% of household energy use for an off-grid household, for a rural off-grid household, for example. And that only improves to about 80% for a grid-connected household. And if you can compare that to about 10% for an OECD country. So you can't talk about a just energy transition without solving for cooking. It's a daily activity, and it's material. And clean cooking access delivers both health, environment, and gender and livelihood benefits. So a transition to clean cooking has really got a significant impact. So to your question, Tamsin, specifically about CCA's position on LPG, I guess the first thing to say, and I say this at the risk of losing friends and alienating people, Clean Cooking Alliance doesn't hold a brief for the LPG industry. We don't hold a brief for any industry, actually. We are concerned with and support anything that transitions people to clean cooking fuels and to a cleaner cooking future. Having said that, we think that LPG is a big part of that solution. So the first thing to say is that we think that LPG in many countries is the fastest and most economically scalable solution to moving people to clean cooking en masse. Our position is that where a technology or a fuel is proven to be scalable, then we should all join forces and invest in those scalable solutions. And from our perspective, the most scalable solutions, when we're talking about bringing the most number of people to clean cooking technologies, are electric and LPG. Factually speaking, the science is showing us, and CCA funded a study that was published earlier this year, that LPG has proven health and environmental benefits compared with the business as usual scenario. And if you'll allow me, I'm just going to pick out some highlights from that study. So this study looked at about 77 low and middle income countries and compared a business as usual scenario to a sort of four different scenarios of a transition. One of those being a full transition to LPG, one being a full transition to electric, and then some kind of proportional transitions. And the study accounted for upstream and end use emissions from gas and electric cooking. And the results are quite clear that a full transition to LPG would lead to drastic reductions in emissions of nearly all climate forcing and health damaging pollutants. This is through to 2040. And that's relative to a business as usual scenario. So LPG, a full transition to LPG is much better than our business as usual scenario. I must also say that a transition to electric would achieve the same thing, but it would cost much more than a transition to LPG. So all of that was to support the point that the science shows us that LPG is a solution that is scalable, but also leaves us in a better position from a health and environmental point of view. And then I think my last point would be that CCA supports the principle of national self-determination. So where governments see LPG as a key pillar in their energy transitions, we think that those positions should be supported. And we acknowledge that in the clean cooking ecosystem, there have been some, shall we say, skeptical or negative voices towards LPG, but where governments see LPG as a solution, we think that those positions at a national level should be supported with investment to scale. And it is really an issue of supporting investment to scale so that we can achieve what we need to achieve. Thanks so much.
That's great. Thank you, Simba. It's fantastic to have the support of our Observer member, Clean Cooking Alliance, and yourself on this call today. So thank you for those interesting insights. And I'm sure we're going to have a few queries from the viewers asking for links through to those reports, which we can share in the follow-up to this webinar. So thank you for those insights. So sticking with the SDGs, because Simba, you've referred to SDG 3, SDG 7, etc. there. I'm going to hop over to SDG 11, which deals with sustainable cities and communities, where we could see a switch from higher polluting fuels to LPG could tackle air pollution within cities. The number 11 is also the number of years Angelique Burden has been in her current role as Marketing and Communications Director at Westport Fuel Systems. Angelique, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So Angelique, what is the role, or what role is autogas currently playing in the energy transition?
Well, actually, LPG is a fuel that is used for a long time in transportation, I would say. It has actually proved already its benefits. And for that, people may say it's an old solution. How about the future? But to be honest, as mentioned before, LPG autogas as a transportation fuel is easy to get access to. It's available, it's cleaner, it's cheaper. So in this case, we all believe that autogas is the solution, especially for the transition period. It makes it easy to access again, but also for the rural areas. In this case, you know, not everyone really can drive an electric car. It's too expensive. But for that, not everyone has access to electricity. So in this case as well, autogas, LPG is the solution for so many people around the world.
That's fantastic. So we've heard from Simba as well on the question of an affordable, just energy transition as well. What do you believe? I mean, we're also speaking about affordability here in terms of the energy transition. What do you believe could be the future role of autogas within the energy transition?
Well, the autogas at the moment is already cleaner than gasoline, I would say. You know, LPG already is about up to 20 and less on CO2, and also on particles and on NOx. It's a cleaner fuel, and especially now we hear about the renewable fuels. We have a great potential in even getting more cleaner than we are. Again, also on the availability and the price of it. It makes it far more accessible and far more practical solution, I would say, than you know, not using it. It has an infrastructure that's available. It's easy to access. And for the future, you know, there is plenty of oil still. There is plenty of gasoline, diesel. So as LPG is a biofuel, definitely there will be enough LPG. And also, as we will understand also later, it can be blended with other molecules or actually other fuels. So for that, I would say it's a future fuel.
Thank you, Angelique. LPG is a future fuel. So thank you for sharing that. Well, let's keep on that topic of a clean burning, low carbon energy where transitions to LPG can result in immediate carbon savings. And let's look at the role of LPG within power generation. So I'd like to bring in Christoph Ramnitz, who is the chair of the WLPGA's working group on LPG for power gen. Christoph, welcome this afternoon.
Hi, Tamsin, and thanks for having me. I'd like to really dive in or continue where Angelique started. Many of the points that she made apply to power generation as well. But before we get there, just a few comments about LPG as a transitionary or transitory fuel for the power generation side of things. People have been having difficulties explaining, you know, why LPG as a carbon-based fuel makes sense. And I keep telling people, nobody has ever really gone out on exploration to lift LPG out of the ground. It's a byproduct. So as long as there is natural gas being searched and looked for, drilled for, and oil, there will be LPG. And so we're a side effect, and you might as well use it rather than flare it, which is what we did in the past. So I think it's an important point. Nobody goes out to drill for LPG. So it's the best use of a side effect, and I think we need to keep that in mind. Now, coming to power generation, I think this is the greatest and the best time for LPG being used in power generation. And why is that? Because as the world is transitioning towards cleaner fuels, in particular in places like Africa, Southeast Asia, we're seeing or questioning whether people want to go and leapfrog right into renewables. But renewables, as we've heard from Rob and others, they're intermittent. So what is your alternative? You can, and how do you bring electricity, and I say early in the morning or late in the evening when the sun sets, before the sun rises or sets, what can you do and what is the best fuel to use? And historically, this has been liquid fuels that people have been using. Now, liquid fuels, and we've done analyses, for instance, in your country, Tamsin, they're more than 100% expensive, more expensive than LPG these days when using for power generation. So much cheaper, cleaner. We've heard that. So the US Energy Information Administration keeps publishing data, and the emissions both on CO2 and NOx, nitrogen oxide, are significantly lower than when using liquid fuels. So even cleaner than when you revert and use LNG, liquefied natural gas, because there is a methane slip when you convert it. So even there, LPG is cleaner. We've heard about the ease of transportation and the availability in most countries. Almost every country has LPG facilities. And then from Simba, we also heard, you know, the importance of scalability. So if there is significant use of LPG somewhere for cooking, then piggyback on that, on the infrastructure that is in place, and use it for power generation. So I think today and for the next decade, I would advocate that LPG for power generation is really an ideal fuel. It can fill the gap where you don't have, or where renewables can't do the job fully, batteries still being way too expensive. So that's where I see the opportunity. Many of the equipment manufacturers, or OEMs, have products and they're tested, they're proven. So what people need to do is they need to show courage to go into LPG for power generation. Just because we haven't used it extensively in the past doesn't mean we can't be using it from tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. And Christoph, can you elaborate in a bit more detail as to what the prerequisites would be in considering LPG as a feedstock for power generation?
Sure. So it's the same thing that we hear everywhere else. So first off, you need LPG availability, and looking around the globe, it's present almost everywhere. Second point is what I've alluded to earlier, is the affordability. So LPG wins hands down the test against liquid fuels almost in any country in the world. The accessibility is constantly improving. I think that is important. And then I kind of think, I look around and I look at what I said earlier about where does it make most sense in a distributed environment. So I wouldn't put up a big LPG fired power plant as a central power plant with 100, 200 megawatts. There are cases where that has happened, but I would recommend this is actually a small distributed source of power generation that works well in conjunction with renewables. So make it a hybrid solution with renewables. And we can talk about other side benefits, again, that liquid fuels do not offer, such as combined heat and power. So if you generate electricity using LPG, you're going to get heat that you can convert into steam or into hot water. You can actually use that heat through a heat exchanger to cool buildings if you are in hot regions of the world, something, again, you couldn't be doing with liquid fuels. So there are lots of advantages, and these are all proven and tested. So it's not like if you decided tomorrow to consider LPG as a source of power generation for your electricity, that you were entering new ground. It's all been done before, and it's just a question of spreading the message, getting the news out there that people should tap into this potential, consider it as an alternative source of electricity generation.
Excellent. Thank you, Christoph. And I can see a couple questions coming in. Just a reminder to all the viewers to please put your questions in the Q&A box. Bridget's going to be running the Q&A with the panelists towards the end of the session. So please do keep them coming in. So just, I'm going to stick on the SDGs topic here. And so as there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, so are there 17 research and development programs that Futuria is currently running. So Futuria is part of SHV Energy, and we have the pleasure of having the CEO, Rebecca Groen, with us today. So Rebecca, renewable liquid gas seems to be a very fast-moving space. What role do you see renewable liquid gas playing in the energy transition?
An essential one, and actually not just in the transition, because I think we are probably always going to be in transition, but absolutely in the energy mix that we need wherever we need energy around the world, because it will always depend on the availability of feedstock, the right conversion technology, and all of the applications. We need a little bit of everything, everywhere, all at once. And that's really one of the things that we have as a priority at SHV Energy in establishing Futuria. And actually, we now have 18 projects, because we just signed a new one last week. So I'm sorry about that link with the SDG goals, but we really need to keep looking for what makes sense to deliver something that is as safe, efficient, and versatile as LPG, which is the reason that we're all on this call, and hopefully all of the participants are watching this call, but that is made from renewable and recycled carbon feedstock, because that's what's really going to make sure we have a long-term sustainable model to support our customers getting the energy they need in the form that they need it at the price that they can afford. And really that balance of all the different elements, which are kind of uniquely available, as you've heard from all of the wonderful speakers before me, that's really what makes renewable liquid gas so important, but also so possible, so much potential for us as an industry, because it can be safe, because it can be effective, because it can be transported. So to all of those applications that we need today in the transition and in the end goal mix, which will never be an end goal because we will have innovated other things and things will change. So we always need to keep looking at what makes sense.
Thank you, Rebecca. And just keeping on that topic, so have you seen developments in renewable liquid gas production change over the past few years?
Fantastically. So about 5 years ago, my very first WLPGA event, I think there were 1 or 2 presentations around bio-LPG. In the last couple of events, we've seen so much great work going on all around the world, various different places, not just on bio-LPG or renewable propane and renewable butane, but also now looking at DME and what role that molecule, dimethyl ether, in its renewable and recycled carbon feedstock form, how that can really support the industry to defossilize, which is actually, I think, what we're all trying to do in the short term, because we all need carbon. So it's trying to replace the fossil with non-fossil, renewable, recycled carbon. And that's been amazing over the last few years to watch. There's still more to do, obviously. It's the reason, of course, that we have the Global Science Conference for the first time ever in Rome. But I think the momentum is significant.
Well, that's great. I mean, tons of excitement. Always love your energy as well, Rebecca. But could you also share a couple of the new exciting opportunities that you're currently pursuing, if you can share them, and why they're exciting, if you could share that with us?
Yeah, well, so I was looking at where all the participants on this call came from and noticed indeed that there's a nice geographical spread. I think countries that are really inspiring me at the moment are India, Brazil, and the US for various different reasons. In India, it's this wonderful opportunity to really take locally available agricultural residues that are currently a problem, as Simba also presented in is the situation in lots of places around the world, and also Rob presented in terms of the air quality impact. So if we start to think, what could we do with all of those agricultural residues and transform them into something that can be really beneficial because it helps displace a more expensive import, and that's absolutely the case in India. And the government is really looking at this in a comprehensive way to understand how can they do something as inspirational as they've already done in the last 8 years with their E10 program. And we're promoting this R10 of getting to 10% of locally produced DME in a project that we call ASHA, that we're in the middle of working out with various different players in the Indian context, to really understand how we, when we pull all our resources together, how we can make this happen. And I'm convinced it can happen there quicker than anywhere else potentially, because it's really about looking at that end goal of getting the different parts of the chain to work together. And that's similar in Brazil. The US is a slightly different context because we also have 3 extremely inspirational pieces of legislation: the Inflation Reduction Act, the Chips and Science Law, and the Infrastructure Bill. I might have got the law and bill wrong there on which way around they're called, but it's some really positive and financially interesting ways to encourage innovation. And those things, I think, should really stimulate a whole load of innovation around renewable liquid gas.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing, Rebecca. I'm being poked and prodded that we're starting to run low on timing here. We've got about 6 minutes left in this panel discussion, but please do keep popping your questions into the Q&A box. And as I mentioned, Bridget will be taking the panelists through with us. But speaking on exciting developments, Simba, are there any technology or business development models and last mile distribution that are helping to scale up LPG adoption and usage?
Yeah, thanks, Samson. So I spend most of my time actually in the private sector facing work that CCA does, and I work with a lot of companies around, well, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa, where I spend most of my time. And there are, I think, the from a cooking perspective, LPG has moved on quite a lot. I think some of the big kind of investment we've seen in clean cooking over the last few years has come from LPG technological developments. Metered LPG, where at the last mile distribution end of things, distributors are looking for ways that they can include some hardware onto existing LPG cylinders that allow pay-as-you-go usage of LPG in households. I think is an interesting move. What we've seen so far is that the main barrier to wide-scale adoption of that technology has really been the cost of adding the additional hardware onto the cylinders. But I'm pleased to say that there's a lot of work that's been going on in this area, and I think it's an area that we will see more development in, because one of the main barriers to increased household use of LPG for cooking, especially in kind of low income households, is the continued cost, the onward cost of filling up cylinders. And if you can reduce that to a more pay-as-you-go usage pattern that kind of mirrors how people earn money, then I think we'll see some development there. Interestingly as well, from the perspective of the carbon markets, the gold standard has quite recently approved a new methodology for metered and measured technologies, and that then opens up the possibility for some carbon finance flowing into kind of some of these metered business models. There are other things going on, people experimenting with small cylinders, 0.5 kg cylinders, for example. I work with a company in Kenya that's looking at that, to again trying to mirror how people earn and how people spend. So try and actually just do a one-on-one head-on collision between someone who's going and buying a tin of charcoal at the end of the day and trying to offer them LPG in a sort of similar buying pattern. So yeah, I think there's quite a lot going on.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Simba. It sounds like a lot of exciting developments. We've got developments going on in renewable liquid gas across the clean cooking space. So lots of exciting things happening. Christoph, would you be able to reference a couple of existing operations where LPG is being used for power gen?
Yes, of course. There have been operations that have been running on LPG for more than 2 decades. In fact, before the 21st century, which seems a long time ago, but isn't that long ago, we had operations in Japan mostly running on LPG before LNG became more fashionable and they did it in big style. But back to your question, I think the sweet spot, and this is important for our audience, in my view, is somewhere up to 10 megawatts. And we have engines running on LPG. For instance, in Puerto Rico, there is a hospital called La Concepcion, which was one of the very few institutions or one of the very few sites that during Hurricane Maria, which was quite a number of years ago, it kept operating throughout the hurricane hitting the island, whereas all the other centralized power went down. So I think that's a fantastic reference case. A more recent development is a cashew nut processing plant in Mali that's running on LPG. Now, thinking about Mali, you need to get the LPG in from Senegal, so it's actually quite a lot of trucking that is involved, but they've decided to go and run on LPG. It's more affordable, cleaner than diesel, as I said earlier, and it's a nice proof point. And then we have, for instance, a 45 megawatt installation also running on engines in Chile, the Teno power plant, which comes in, and this is interesting, whenever the renewables that are becoming increasingly important in Chile's power supply, when they're going off or when they're not available, then this LPG-fired power plant actually kicks in. And then there is a number of larger installations, like in Vietnam. There is the NGIHI, the Nghi Son refinery, 200 megawatts running for the last 6 years on LPG, because they have access to LPG on a regular basis. So I could carry on. There are plenty of examples out there, and people should be encouraged to consider, as I said earlier, the use of LPG for power generation. This is just a sampling across geographies and purposes that I've just given you.
Great, thank you, Christoph. And I'm hearing tons of new case studies that Michael and I and the comms team will probably be working on. They're sounding fantastic. Cashew nuts really do sound like a good case study for us to proceed with. Angelique, just a quick question. We've already spoken about the attractiveness of autogas as a fuel. What would you like to say to industry leaders and policymakers?
Well, thank you for the question. I would really mention, like, don't forget about LPG autogas. It has an immense contribution already. And by all the attention from the other solutions, it might seem that LPG autogas is not so interesting anymore, but it's the other way around, I would say. Again, I don't need to repeat myself. It's available, it's cleaner, it's cheaper. So in this respect, I would say, please make sure that autogas is still on the map. Don't let go of it, and see the benefits, and because if you let it go, then it's really hard to get it back. So don't destroy the market, but keep supporting us. And we already heard the many stories that there are lots of opportunities for LPG to increase the market share, and also to develop the markets in several parts of the world, I would say. So give the freedom to people, let people choose themselves on how they want to move, how they want to use transportation, and don't focus too much on electricity, because if we all focus on electricity, we know what happens. We can't watch TV anymore. I don't think so. So all in all, I would say, make sure that you don't forget about LPG and the benefits of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelique. And I have one final question before I hand the mic back to Bridget. Rebecca, if you had a magic wand, what would you like to see happen in renewable liquid gas developments?
Oh, gosh. So I'm a little bit jealous of all the attention that SAF gets. And aviation fuel is really important. I fly a lot for my job, so I'm looking for alternatives are essential, and I'll be very grateful. But if politicians and investors realize that LPG globally is the same size as aviation fuel in terms of tonnage used, and put the same level of effort in policy and innovation, wow, wouldn't that be wonderful? So just getting the recognition that LPG is essential and is wonderful and is a huge business opportunity would really be my magic wish.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's a fantastic wish. I'm sure we'll all follow you on that. So I'm just going to hand back to Bridget now to take us through the audience Q&A. Thank you again.
No, that was fantastic, folks. Thank you so much. So insightful, exciting roles ahead, very broad, and a lot of opportunities out there, clearly. We do have a question we have a number of questions, actually. We have a question from David for Simba. Do the consumers that you speak to have a preference between cooking with a flame or cooking with electricity?
Interesting one. So a lot of cooking at household level is cultural. So a lot of it depends where you're asking the question. I think electric cooking is a more novel thing for many people in my part of the world, for example. But we're seeing a lot of technological and investment in kind of things like electric pressure cookers, things like that, which kind of, it depends on how much electricity is available. So Tamsin will tell you, like, where we come from, there's electricity deficit, so it's not always a foolproof solution. I think LPG is for most people an aspirational choice. A lot of people aspire to cooking with LPG. It's cleaner, it's quick. You can boil water at a quick pace compared to using biomass. But there are still some cultural issues that we see, and also concerns around safety. So there's more to be done there around education and making sure people understand that LPG is safe if it's used properly, and also having the ecosystem work together to make sure that safety is no longer a concern. I think we've made some progress in that, but at a household level, that still comes up, people being afraid of LPG. So I think work for the industry to do, and certainly from CCA's perspective, we are supporting work in that regard as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have a question from Amal. LPG is clean, but it's also really sensitive to hot weather and flammable gas. Does this affect its role in the energy transition? I'm going to throw that open to the panel. Anyone want to jump in on that one?
I mean, I'm happy to take that one from a storage perspective. So if you're looking at power generation, you will have to have on-site LPG storage, with the right kind of equipment, with the right kind of tanks in place. There is no issue, there is no challenge, even in a hotter climate, to keep and store your LPG. So I don't see much of an issue, and I would defer here to my panel colleagues when it comes to LPG as a cooking gas. But LPG, as far as I'm concerned, is being used in very hot climates around the world, and it's being used very successfully.
Okay, thank you so much, Christoph. We have a question here for, I'm going to pose this to Rebecca. What about the time schedule for bio-LPG in Europe?
Yes, so there is bio-LPG available in Europe. We also supply it through SHV Energy businesses in about 10 different countries, and I know a lot of the other distributors of LPG do as well. The volumes are currently small because it's only the LPG fraction of the renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel process. So one of the reasons that I'm again going to promote the Global Science Conference in Rome is because we need on-purpose production. We need to be making sure that we have processes in place that are specifically devoted to producing the gases that we want, that are useful in all of our applications. And there's a lot going on there. That will also help, of course, because the sooner we get large volumes, including DME, for example, RDME, when we get that up and running, we have a project to develop the first of a kind RDME plant in the UK with significant volumes. That's on purpose. So then we start to really see a significant increase in the volume available. But it is already available in Europe, and I think it will continue to grow because there is more capability and capacity coming on stream. But ultimately, we need to be control using on demand, on purpose. Oh, you're mute, Bridget.
I'm sorry, I've got lawn mowing going on in the background, so I'm on and off. Who would have thought this time of morning? Anyway, I have a follow-on question, I think, for you, Rebecca, from Wasim. How much ground synthetic LPG has made, and how much ground synthetic LPG has made, and what is the timescale that you foresee for it?
Well, I think the question then is sort of all different routes to new RLPG, ELPG, bio-LPG, whatever we want to call it. So basically LPG without the P, which is one of the reasons that we're going to renewable liquid gas, although I did see the question in there about why we call it sustainable liquid gas. We had lots of discussions about that. I'll leave that to Michael and Tamsin and the WLPGA team to work out what the best definitions are. Right now, we've got various different demonstrations, not just we, but the world and people in and around the world, in the world, are working on various different demonstrations. So there are, to my knowledge, at least 12 very advanced projects to produce propane, butane, or a combination of those from various different feedstock ongoing. None of them are yet commercially viable, so they need a few more years of development. So the volumes are still pretty small. Bio-LPG as a byproduct from HVO and SAF, that is available, and I think there are quite a lot of different places. I'm sure GemServe can tell you how much that is and where it is as well, and other sources around the world.
Thank you. We have a question for the World LPG Association. So Michael or Tamsin, in Africa, where the poverty rate is high, which in turn makes LPG consumption and adoption low, with a high cost of infrastructure, pricing, and other distribution. What is the World LPG Association doing to change this narrative?
That's an easy question, but thank you, whoever asked it. I mean, one of the things we do is we work to help unbottle the major bottlenecks. So what often happens in markets like Africa is you have infrastructure bottlenecks to get product into the markets, and this just raises the cost. And then you have bad infrastructure or weak infrastructure to get the product from the ports, for example, into the markets. All of this adds to the final cost to end users, which eventually makes it unaffordable for everyone but the urban rich or the urban wealthy. So what we try to do is work with national governments, show them templates and models of what other countries have done. We often use Brazil as a great example for how African markets can develop, because they face a lot of the similar challenges in terms of topography and rural communities, et cetera, et cetera. And use those templates and see if you could take a model for Brazil or for India or for Indonesia and graft it into an African context, see what works and what doesn't work. But that's the kind of support that we give not only national governments in sub-Saharan Africa, but also our members that have operations there.
Excellent. And on that note, I want to thank everybody, Michael, Rob, Angelique, Rebecca, Simba, Christoph, and of course, Tamsin. Wonderful job, everyone, today. We've heard a lot of information, so thank you all for sharing your expert perspectives. Now, before I leave, I believe I speak on behalf of everybody in the industry when I say we're looking forward to a particular event this year, LPG Week 2023, and once again convening for a week of networking, the latest innovations in LPG, and that special sense of community of being involved and of being a part of the future of our industry, whether you attend in person or virtually. By the way, registration is open. It's been open for a while, but this Friday at midnight, Central European time, the early bird rate closes. So if you do plan to go, I suggest you book you register now for LPG Week before that rate goes away. It makes a big difference. It promises, as Michael said earlier, to be the biggest LPG Week event ever. Exhibit space is almost sold out. So if you plan to go, book your seat, book your hotel room, and consider if attending in person is not an option for you, consider the virtual option. Now, we're lucky to have Angelique on the line today. She is the host of Autogas Day at LPG Week. Angelique, why should people show up for Autogas Day this year?
Well, thank you, Bridget, for the question. I feel very honored that I quickly can, explain why this is a special year and event this year. It's the 5th International Autogas Day in Rome, biggest market in Europe for LPG autogas. And we have a very, very interesting program showing how the market develops nowadays, and also with new innovations from OEMs like such as Renault, but also other innovations will be shared. We have speakers all over the world, so it's really exciting. I would say check the website, make sure that you're there, and also join us in the conversation. Because again, LPG autogas is there for you to enjoy, to drive safe, cleaner, and more affordable. So please join us on Autogas Day, 17th of November in Rome, but actually all over the world as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to being involved and seeing that as well. I want to thank the sponsors of LPG Week, and you can also visit lpgweek.com. For more information about the event and to register, make your way to Rome this year. In person, amazing, but keep in mind that virtual option. Here's a sneak preview of what you can expect of LPG Week 2023. That looks exciting. I hope you all have an opportunity to participate at LPG Week. I want to thank our experts again today. Thank you so much. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. I hope you're all inspired by the perspectives, the exciting role of LPG in the future, the opportunities ahead of us. Thank you so much for joining us, experts, audience. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.